And I want to make an argument for why sad psalms are necessary. So my first reason why sad psalms are necessary is that acknowledging your feelings is an act of faith. I don't know where Christians ever got the idea that you're just supposed to stuff down your feelings, especially those of feelings that we might think of as negative or hard to deal with. In the Old Testament, people are sharing their feelings and what they're going through, and they don't hold back. The Psalms are full of people expressing rage and bitterness and anger and frustration and being overwhelmed. And none of those emotions are considered beyond the realm of God. When you can acknowledge your feelings, it's an act of faith because you're saying that you believe God is big enough and powerful enough to address any emotion that you have. And it's an act of faith because by sharing what you're feeling with God, you're saying that you believe God can see you through it and help you navigate whatever you are going through. God is not fragile. Acknowledge your feelings before God. It is an act of faith. Another reason why these sad psalms are necessary is that engaging the yuck in our lives is the way that we can get unstuck. It's like when you have a wound on your body somewhere, you have to clean out the wound, get all the yucky stuff out of there before it can start to heal. It's the same way with our emotions. Instead of bottling up those things we're feeling and making them infect us further, we have to let that stuff out. And letting it out to God is such a helpful practice because once we let out our anger or our frustration or our emotion, we can start to see how God moves in and is healing us. Another reason why the sad psalms are necessary is that God already knows what we're feeling. God has asked for your whole heart, not just the most beautiful, shiny parts of it, but your whole heart. And when you give your whole heart to God, you're giving God all of those parts of yourself. The parts that are frightened, the parts that are sad, the parts that are angry, and you're letting God work on your heart. So don't be afraid to share with God what you are experiencing. God is big enough to handle your anger. God is big enough to deal with whatever emotions you throw at God. Another reason why these sad psalms are necessary is that God meets you in your sad places, but God doesn't leave you there. When you bring your feelings to God, you are also placing your trust in God, that God can bring you to a new day, that God can bring light into your time of darkness. We can think about it like death and resurrection, that God met Jesus in death and brought new life. God does that for us too. And then the final reason why I think sad psalms are necessary is that God works through time. You don't have to pretend you're better until you're better. And God takes the time that you need in order to start to feel better. I want to look at that psalm that I shared with you at the beginning of the sermon, Psalm 13, because I feel like this psalm shares all of those things that I just shared with you about why psalms are so important, especially these sad psalms that help us name what we feel and share it with God. I don't think Psalm 13 was written in one sitting. It says it is a psalm of David, but I don't think David sat down and wrote it all in one night. I think this is a psalm that took time to evolve. I think it could be separated into 3 separate journal entries if we imagine that King David had a prayer journal, and this is how he recorded it. I think in the first journal entry it would say, "How long, O God, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I bear pain in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all day long? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me?" It's just a bunch of questions. There's no answers. It's just David coming before God with whatever problem he has, and he doesn't list what it is, but God knows what it is. We don't know what enemy he's struggling with or what pain he's carrying with him, but he invites God into it by just asking these questions, and they don't even have to be the right questions. But David is unafraid to share this with God. And then I think journal entry number 2 that maybe came days or weeks later. David is still working through this problem, and David says, "Consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep the sleep of death. My enemy will say, I have prevailed, and my foes will rejoice because I am shaken." I think David is saying, please, God, act in this situation. He's still struggling, and he's bringing his desperation to God. But then we see journal entry number 3, where this may have happened weeks or months later. But David says this, "But I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation." And he says, "I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me." David remembers to come back and to thank God for getting him through whatever that hard and terrible situation was that he faced. But he included God in every step of the issue he was dealing with. I think we forget to do that sometimes. We think we're supposed to be happy. We think that the other range of emotions that we experience are not valid or not something we can bring to God. But in this first week of our Summer Jam series, I want you to get in touch with those sad songs. Maybe it's a sad hymn, maybe it's an old song from the radio, maybe it is something that you hear in worship today. But get in touch with it. Don't be afraid to let the tears flow. Know that those emotions are valid and that God meets you even in your darkest place. And when God meets you there, God brings you to the light. Amen.